Nadia, and welcome to Scrum Master, the video series where I give you practical tips on how to build awesome teams. In the current situation where everybody is working from home, people are still trying to figure out, how to do the same things they used to do before when they were in the office all together, but now virtually, online. A lot of people are not really used to that. And I believe that the role of Scrum Master in facilitating sprint events and other discussions became even much more important in this climate. Now, after having conducted different webinars and classes and workshops online and creating some collaborative sections within those classes, I would like to share some of my tips and tricks that I believe will help you create much more productive and engaging discussions and create the same space that you would expect to see in person, but in an online setting. Let's jump into the tips right away. So my tip number 1 is spend enough time to prepare. The preparation was always key when we talk about meetings, right? If people come into the meeting unprepared, they don't really know what the meeting is about, or they didn't read the material that was sent to them in advance, the meeting most likely will be very unproductive. Now, in the virtual setting, it became even much more important, and especially from the facilitator point of view. So if you are preparing for a meeting or any sprint event, whether it's a retrospective or a review or a planning session, you need to be prepared in advance, and you need to spend much more time to prepare the material. And this might include thinking about how you're going to facilitate the discussion, what kind of techniques you're going to use, what kind of questions you will be asking people, or how you will be engaging them in discussion during that time, what kind of time boxes you need to follow, as well as what are the general outcomes that you expect from this meeting. And most likely you will need to prepare some material, kind of the handouts that you will be giving away to people as a reference, because it is much more difficult to follow a meeting without any reference material when you're not even in the same room. Tip number 2, set working agreements up front. The discussion might become very unproductive very quickly if you do not set the right expectations up front, especially around what kind of behaviors do you expect from people in those meetings, especially in a virtual setting when you might not be able to see people or people have different working conditions in the setting. So one of the most important things that you should discuss right away is the fact that if people are attending the meeting, they need to be 100% engaged in this particular meeting. It means that they cannot check their emails, they cannot write some other messages in chat to someone else who is not in the meeting, and should not even people who are in the meeting, because that would be a side conversation that detracts from the outcome of the meeting we're working on together. They cannot talk with anyone who is maybe around them at the house. They should be 100% focused on the meeting. And it is very important to set this expectation right at the beginning with your team. And it might sound harsh, and people might feel uncomfortable saying that, I can't do some other work, right? Try to turn it back to, if we were sitting together in the same room, in person in this meeting, what would you think if someone from your team was working on something or sending someone an email? You would know that they're not listening. So if you're in a meeting and you ask a question and no one replies, or someone says, "Oh, excuse me, I didn't hear it," most likely you were just not listening, right? And if this is the case, why are we even in this meeting together? Maybe you shouldn't be in this meeting, right? And I think that's one of the most important things to discuss, and definitely hold each other accountable for this rule. This has to be a rule within your team when you have any kind of meetings or sprint events. Now, the other rule that I think is important to discuss is camera. I believe that having a camera and having everyone on camera, if possible, is a must. First of all, you're already not in the same room, so you can't see each other, right? So you cannot create this connection. And also, you cannot read body language. I can't even tell you numerous amount of times where I was in a video conference and I could see someone talking to the camera, but I couldn't hear them, or I just could see that they had a question. So I could call out to them and say, hey, I see you have a question. Why don't you ask this question? And without having this visual contact, without having the camera, you can't do that. So you miss on a lot of important discussions at this point. And I think the last thing to kind of talk about with your team, if you're not speaking, put yourself on mute, and ideally try to find a space in your house where it's the quietest, right? So don't sit in the kitchen if your family's having lunch. Try to find a quiet spot where you can really focus on the meeting 100%. Maybe there are some other rules that you would implement in your team, but definitely talk about some working agreements before you start your virtual meetings in general. And tip number 3 is to create a collaborative space. To keep the engagement pretty high, you need to create a collaborative space for people to contribute their ideas during the sprint event or any other meeting that you have. And it means that you need to engage the participants into asking questions or providing feedback as much as possible. And ideally, you would want to use different tools that can facilitate and make it very easy to do. Obviously, not every company can use different tools, so you need to be creative and maybe use chat window in your local software to encourage people to really contribute, not just listen in. If people are just listening in, considering that right now we have so many more meetings that we have to attend just because we're not sitting in the same place, in the same office, if you're just listening in, well, and especially if you're working on something else, you might as well just work on something else because you don't really listen. In this case, if you do create a meeting, if you do create an event, think about how you're going to engage people, right? How you're going to ask them for their feedback. Obviously, if you think about sprint retrospective, it's very easy. That's the whole point, is to collect people's ideas and thoughts and discuss. So everybody in the sprint retrospective contributes, and that's expected. But what about meetings like sprint planning or sprint review, especially sprint review, where the team might be presenting some features to stakeholders? And if you have stakeholders in the sprint review, and you should have, think about how you're going to engage them. Maybe you can ask them to submit questions during the team presentation so that you can ask them at the end. Maybe you have a survey that you would like them to fill in during the sprint review so that you can collect their feedback. So think about the ways how you can engage the stakeholders in this meeting so that they're not just listening in, because that's not a very engaging way for you to gather their feedback. Now, for sprint planning, there are also different ways that you can engage the team. Maybe engage them into creating the sprint goal together, in estimation, maybe voting on what kind of items they need to bring into the sprint backlog. So there are many different ways how you can do that. And whenever you prepare for your sprint event or any other meeting, think about how you're going to engage every single participant. And tip number 4, write it down. Sometimes connection might break, or there might be some issues with audio or video, and people attending your meeting might not understand what you were saying or not hear it properly, even if they're listening. So it's best to write it down as much as possible. So if you know that you're going to ask a question during the meeting, or you know that you will ask people to contribute on a specific topic, make sure that you have it written down somewhere so that you can share slides or you can share your screen and give people this visual contact with the information, because a lot of us are more visual and it's more difficult to capture information or understand information just by listening to it, especially when we're in a virtual setting. So think about how you're going to collect all this information, as well as the outcomes of the meeting, Once again, because of the connection, because it's in a virtual setting, sometimes we might misunderstand each other, we might misinterpret the information that is being given to us. Making sure that you have the outcomes of the meeting somehow captured, whoever it is who is capturing it, however you want to collect this information. Think about how you're going to make it visible and written down for people to refer to during the meeting as well as after it. And tip number 5 is keep it small. It would be great if we can invite everyone for a 1-hour meeting and solve all our problems during that 1 hour with everyone involved and everyone contributing. However, it is not really productive, and if you have too many people in the meeting, well, most likely most of those people will not be able to contribute, right? Especially in the virtual setting. It might be easier in-person setting where you can split people up. So think about the people who need to be there and only invite those people. Now, the ideal, you would want to have maybe 8-10 people maximum if you want for everyone in the group to contribute or maybe to say something. And if you want to really have a very engaging discussion and get some really encourage people to speak up, 2 to 3 people groups are the best. And obviously, if you just want people to contribute their ideas, but you don't necessarily expect them to speak up on all of the ideas they contributed, then you can have a bigger setting and you can use different collaboration tools to do that. But there are some tools that you can use to break people into smaller groups to allow for those discussions to happen. So depending basically on what is the outcome that you're expecting from your meeting, you might think about how many people you want to have in this meeting so that you can see how you can engage them and how much contribution from them you want during that meeting. So here are some tips and tricks that I wanted to share with you around how to better facilitate your virtual meetings as a Scrum Master, as well as some of the tools that I've seen useful that you can also use in your virtual settings, whether it's a workshop, a sprint planning, or a sprint review, or retrospective. And if you want to learn more, I will be running various events, virtual events for Scrum Masters, as well as different workshops and classes. So I do encourage you to go to scrummaster.com and check out what is available. Join me for some of the future classes. I'll be very happy to see you, and you will be able to see what kind of tools I use and learn to use them, see them in action. And I think it will be very helpful for you if you're looking for something like that to really enable you create engaging discussions during the meetings. So I hope that it was very helpful for you, and I hope to see you next time. Cheers and Scrum on!